mic lock is on.
Excuse me. What's going on, everybody? This is the Wisdom Matrix, and this video is about something called, or this video is going to be called something like, what is wisdom? So what is wisdom? Wisdom is the applying of knowledge or principles or whatever you've gained from your awareness. Or awareness is wisdom in some ways, but that's another
11:25
video.
a.m. Twitter now. Jessica even tweeted, "How you indoctrinate yourself."
So, when you're wise, when you're making wise decisions, what's happening is that you've discerned certain things because of your level of awareness. Well, before I get into that, actually, the problem that most people have is that they they think that knowledge is extremely important, and don't get me wrong, it can be important and it is important, but what ends up happening is that a lot of people end up getting so involved in this idea of that knowledge is important that they overflow themselves with knowledge, and they overload their brain to such a level that they end up not knowing. They end up being more confused and more trapped within their own minds than if they were to trying to apply certain principles and knowledges in their everyday life. So this is what happens a lot with, not necessarily scientists, but people who study science, people who study a lot of different things and a lot of different subjects. I'm not saying that that's not important. It can be important. It can be helpful. But what I'm going to call here over knowledge is where we run into a problem, because what happens is they study all this stuff, but they don't actually look at it. They don't actually understand it, because understanding is more important than actual knowledge. Understanding is basically where you have a certain piece of knowledge, but you understand this knowledge. But even more important than knowledge is, or even more important than understanding, is wisdom. And understanding and wisdom can be useful and are almost interrelated in some ways, because they do kind of come into each other in some ways. So say you and by the way, this doesn't have to mean that you're always wise. Wisdom has many different degrees and forms and levels. Just the same with knowledge and understanding and loving and all these different things, and awareness. So basically, the way I think of it is there's 3 or 4 different levels of something. First, you study it because you don't know anything about it, like say spirituality, or awareness raising, or whatever you want to call it. And then you have the knowledge. Then you know it. But knowing isn't enough. You have to understand it. So So the third level, the first level is unknowing. That's what everybody starts with, right? There's an argument. There are things that awareness actually knows, but that's another subject. There are things that awareness knows that you don't, but that's another subject. But anyways, the first level, especially if you're in your mind, is unknowing. The second level is knowing. That is, you know something. The third level is understanding, where basically you understand how it works. And the fourth level is where you apply this knowing and this understanding, and that's called wisdom. But wisdom isn't something that you just apply, because wisdom has its own 3 levels of, unknowing, then knowing, then understanding. Because if you know wisdom, that's one thing, but if you understand it and you apply it, which is the 4th level, that's when you become deeply wise and deeply understanding of the human condition, or whatever it is that you're trying to understand. So how do you do this? how do you understand this? Well, when it depends on the subject that you're dealing with, but a good way to figure this out, especially when it comes to, well, pretty much anything, but especially when it comes to this, because when it comes to like the mind and spirituality and topics that I've talked about, is ask the question: how do I apply this message? How do I apply this in everyday life? How do I understand it? If I don't understand it, how do I understand it? How do I know it better? And these are questions that you can ask, and once you've started to get like answers, you can ask like, well, once you start to know it a little bit better, it all depends on depends on context. Basically, it all depends on what you're studying. Like, say you're studying something like I've talked about before, like survival, like the ego's goal or mechanism is survival. So you can ask a question like, how do I start to understand this? How do I know it? How do I realize it? And your mind could say, well, you could look at the mind. You could look at how the mind works and try and put that together with other things that you've heard about survival and evolution. And then the next part is, how do I understand? That's pretty much what understanding it is. Knowing it is where you say you watch the videos that I made about the two modes of ego, and a lot of the other videos that I made about how you indoctrinate yourself, and some of the the podcasts I made about the shadow. So you just study all this stuff. And so you say, how do I understand this? Or how do I apply this? How do I apply this in everyday life? How do I use this message to overcome, if possible, this message, overcome this problem of excessive amounts of what I'm going to call reliance upon the ego's methods of survival, the ego's needs for survival. And that's how you become wise, when you start to apply these messages, when you start to understand them more. Because understanding and wisdom, like I said, they're interrelated. Because when you understand something, you start to see the pattern of how it works. And there's a bunch of different ways to understand a message more. How do I understand this message more? Well, maybe one way, probably the best way, especially when it comes to this particular message, is to look at the mind. Look at the mind's activities throughout the day. What is it doing? Is it doing something, or is it doing this because of survival? Because of, the desires and fears, like the two modes of ego that I've talked about before? Why is it doing this? What are the reasons for it? And once you start to see this pattern more, you can ask, well, how do I apply this message? How do I overcome this problem? One way could be, I don't know, like, there's a bunch of different ways to overcome it. Become more aware of it is really the best way, probably. Probably the easiest way, anyways. So, there's a lot of things involved here, but I think that's just the basic understanding of this.
9. Finish recording. 9. 2. Finish mic lock.
So why am I talking about wisdom? Why is it important to understand this? Well, basically, it's because if you don't have a understanding of how to build your understanding and application of this understanding, you may not get very far with your spiritual growth or whatever you're learning. Because a lot of this you can apply to pretty much anything. So how do I apply it? How do I understand it? I mean, with some things it won't matter as much because you're not, most things are like rote learnings, which basically just means that you're memorizing something and then you're repeating it or whatever. Like if you're in school or something, but that's not always true. And so you can try and understand it more if you can. If not, it doesn't really matter. Like the understanding and stuff of this mostly has to apply to mind and spirituality and stuff like this, and insight too, and how insight happens. Like how does insight happen? It happens because I'm asking questions and I'm not necessarily not necessarily giving answers in my mind, but I'm looking with my awareness to see what happens, what comes up. Something like that. Like, it's complicated, but it's complicated to say in practice, but in practice, it's not really that complicated. All you do is you just ask a question and you look with your awareness to see what comes up. Something's going to come up eventually. It may take like a day or a year. It may take a couple seconds or less than that even. Just depends on the question and your level of awareness. And the reason why awareness has more wisdom in it is because awareness is the more aware. Basically, you could almost think of awareness as like a muscle. The more aware you become, the more awareness. Awareness is the stronger it gets, the more discerning it becomes. And the reason why this is, I suppose, is because of its own understanding and learning. Not necessarily because it doesn't know anything, but because it's remembering what it already knew before it took the form of us. It knew everything, but because it takes this form that we're in now, it doesn't know everything. It doesn't know half the things that it knows, if less than that even. So this is why awareness is important. The more aware you become, the more you ask these questions, and the more you look with your awareness, the more answers you'll find, and the more you'll be able to use wisdom. The more you'll be able to see the wisdom and apply it. So,
Mike finished 12, 6.
this is just a basic overview of what wisdom is. This is the Wisdom Matrix, and I'll see you on the next video. If you like this video, please like it. Subscribe if you want to see more videos from me in the future. And if you got some kind of benefit from it, share it with other people so they can get the same kind of benefits as you did. This is the Wisdom Matrix, and I'll see you in the next video.